The Targaryens and their dragons conquered Westeros with fire and blood, but why did they only focus on Westeros? Why is it that after the Doom of Valyria, the Targaryens didn't go back to Essos and reconquer the Valyrian Empire? Why didn't they go back and fill in the vacuum that was left when the Valyrian Empire literally imploded? Now, this seems like a very obvious question, because if they went through the effort of conquering a new continent, why not go through the effort of conquering the old continent that, your people used to be in charge of? Well, there's two reasons, and I'm going to break them down here. One, I'm going to say, is the state of Essos at the time, and the other one is going to be the state of the Targaryens at the time. So for that first question, what was the state of Essos at the time? Well, Essos is a complete and utter mess. The 100 years after the Doom of Valyria are known as the Century of Blood, and that name is very apt because it's during that century that, as that commenter pointed out, there is a power vacuum in Essos. The Valyrian Empire had basically dominated the entire western portion of Essos, and it was suddenly gone overnight. In a matter of hours, it is gone. And that vacuum left as all of these other civilizations that had either been subjugated by the Valyrians or had to kind of like toe the line around the Valyrians suddenly all start grasping for power. And it is truly a bloody mess. We know that, Westeros at the time, all the kingdoms tended to bicker with each other. But at the time of Aegon's conquest, and even beforehand, typically only a few of them would be fighting at a time, versus Essos, which is three times the size of Westeros. So it's a much larger area. And literally everyone is fighting everyone. You have the free cities that are all the former colonies of Valyria, all now trying to assert control over their own area, but not only that, but they are now fighting each other to get extra land from the other ones. Volantis, for example, in the south, in the red there, is trying to subjugate basically all of the old colonies, and they are then having to form these little these little alliances to beat back Volantis. Meanwhile, there are other civilizations that go fully extinct, or pretty close to fully extinct, during the Century of Blood. The Dothraki Sea is a relatively new thing. Beforehand, that was the kingdom of Sarnor, which was the home of the people who were known as the Tall Men. There were also the Kafi, who are kind of a nomadic people, also from these grassland areas. They would eventually settle Karth. Karth is kind of the last remaining outpost of these people. And then you have the cities that were formerly of the Giscari Empire. The Giscari Empire, which Valyria had conquered, they are now also trying to reassert themselves. And so, as all these groups are, existing, trying to snatch some power, trying to snatch some land, you are having them now coming into contact with each other in a very bloody manner. The kingdom of Sarnor is essentially wiped out by the emerging Dothraki. The Dothraki really start to thrive during the Century of War. This is the first time that they've kind of coalesced, and they start actively fighting people. They basically wipe out almost all of Sarnor, save, I think, Saath is one of the last outposts of what was a former kingdom. And then the Kafi, which were already not doing super well, they're just fully taken out by the Dothraki. And Karth is the only one that survives into the present. The Dothraki are also coming into contact with Qohor, and Qohor is having to fight them off, while Qohor is also having to team up with Norvos to fight Volantis. And then you're also having let's see, the three troublesome sisters are the cities of Lys, Tyrosh, and Myr. They are constantly fighting with each other over the disputed lands, the tan lands in the corner over here. My point is everyone is fighting everyone. Everyone is constantly forming new alliances that are strong, and then using that to attack these other strong alliances. And there is constant bloodshed. There is constant war. And while you can look at that chaos and see maybe an opportunity, that does exist, but there are a lot of inherent risks with that. And this is where we come back to the other half of that question. What's the state of the Targaryens? Now, you need to remember that the Targaryens are the last remaining dragon lords in the world after the Doom. They took the 5 dragons that they owned, they took all their possessions, and they skedaddled over to Dragonstone, where they tried to reestablish their life 12 years before the Doom happens. Now, post-Doom, we're in the Century of Blood, and yes, the Targaryens are now the only people of Valyrian descent who still own the magical nukes. They have their 5 dragons that they potentially could use to try to reestablish control over parts of the Valyrian Empire. But there are some inherent issues with that. First, we have reports that there were a couple of Dragon Lords that did actually survive the Doom, and their attempts to kind of reestablish control didn't go so well. So the first one that we know a bit more about was named Orion. Orion survived the Doom, was outside of Valyria when Valyria exploded, still had his dragon. He goes to Qohor and basically assembles a large army and crowns himself the Emperor of Valyria and marches that army into the ruins of Valyria to reclaim the land. This does not go well because Valyria is now a toxic wasteland, and that army and Orion promptly disappeared, never to be seen again. Now, there were also reports that there were a couple other dragon lords with single individual dragons who survived the Doom because they happened to be in other cities. I believe Tyrosh and maybe Mir. I do not remember which cities. Correct me if you remember them in the comments. Now, while the reports are not confirmed in any way, the whispers is those couple of dragon lords that survived in these in the free cities were promptly murdered by the inhabitants of the cities because it was one person and one dragon. Not that it's easy to kill a dragon, but it is easier to kill a dragon when it is just the one. So, while the Targaryens have 5, we don't actually know if all 5 of those dragons had riders and therefore were able to be controlled and used as a magical nuke. And even if they are, 5 dragons, while scary and enough to conquer Westeros, it might be a little harder to conquer all of Essos with. Because something that I think we all need to remember is dragons were very commonplace in Essos because of the Valyrians. These were creatures and beings that the people of the free cities and the opponents of Valyria were used to seeing and used to fighting against. So there is a precedent for these groups being able to occasionally kill dragons. When the Rhoynar rebel against Valyria and stage a big battle, they were able to take out, I think it was 3 dragons in one sitting. And yeah, that's only 3 or whatever, but if you only have 5, that's the ball game right there. In fact, the Rhoynar, after they killed the 3, the reason that they didn't get to, bask in that victory is because Valyria then sent out 300 dragons to go, really just, stamp them out. So I think that we can't dismiss the fact that, one of the reasons that Westeros was a bit easier to conquer is they were not used to dragon combat in the least. Also, Westeros was a bit easier to conquer because, as I said before, while those kingdoms did tend to fight against each other, they weren't all fighting each other at the same time, forming alliances that would, strengthen their numbers. They were very much kind of, divided, and so it was a lot easier, I think, for Aegon to divide and conquer them. Essos, at this point, on the other hand, everyone is going at it. Everyone is fighting everyone. And so placing yourself in the middle of that is a scary and precarious thing to do. Maybe they could have managed it, but there is a very good chance that you are going to lose some of your dragons, which are in short supply at the moment. Not to mention, we need to remember that of the 5 dragons that the Targaryens initially bring to Dragonstone, only one of them lives to Aegon's time, which to me says that all of those dragons were a little older and probably not as battle ready as one would hope. We do know that though dragons get really big the older they are, that they do get slower, and eventually, Balerion, isn't really able to fight towards the end. So I think the Targaryens' specific situation did not leave them in an optimal position to fill the vacuum when everything is going as crazy in Essos as it was at the time. This was a fun video to make, and I'm trying to consistently make some more videos. So please drop down in the comments what you want me to talk about next. I hope you all have a great night.